Edwina. Hello.
Hi, Desi. You look fabulous, as always.
Oh, really? Gosh, I don't know about that. But thank you. So where are you based?
I'm based in Zurich, greeting from sunshine Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, well, greetings from London then. So let's start. I'm super excited to talk to you because there's so much for me to learn and you're doing such interesting things. But let's just start with the beginning. And will you just explain what you do? What's your kind of role in the fashion industry?
Yeah, sure. So I come from the sustainable fashion manufacturing, more on the textile side. So when I say I come from that, because I have background coming from producing recycled material or organic and natural material. So I started my first company, which is called Vivify Textile, specifically giving the access of small, medium-sized brands who have issue looking into or finding the right sustainable fabric at a smaller quantity. We're starting out manufacturing fabric that they can customize the color. So for example, we have maybe 200 different fabric. They pick the fabric and then they can customize the color. They can do digital printing, customize the coating, so on and so forth. It's like you buy a hamburger, then you can make them into a cheeseburger, a quarter pounder. It's just exactly like that. And as it evolved, because we work with over 5,000 different brands internationally, and with all these fashion, I guess, customer designers or brands, they all coming back to me and have one issue. The key issue is that, look, we are already sustainably produce textile, but they don't know how to handle the end of life cycle waste garment. So it can be the offcut from a table. It could have been consumer waste, meaning like, they did digital printing, but the fabric did not meet their standard. So for example, the printing is got a bit of a shadow, the color is not right, or maybe the T-string is not right, the cutter fasteners is not right. Or it can be post-consumer when they wanted to encourage customers, just like H&M's and all these other key brands. For example, I spoke to a brand last week. It's called Lindex and Kuichi from Europe. They also are starting to work on collecting the waste from customers, but they wanted to not only collecting the waste, they want to repurpose the waste. So they come back to me and saying, Edwina, you already produce all these recycled materials. Great, it's amazing. Can you take my waste and then make them new fabric, make new fabric for me? So we started the journey about 3 years ago, really going into in-depth understanding, can we start recycling textile out of textile waste instead of plastic bottle out of textile waste? Because from plastic bottle to textile, it's an open loop recycling. But as you know, the actual plastic bottle industry, they also wanted to advertise themselves as recycle. So if you put into perspective, how many plastic bottle can really be redistributed back into the fashion industry as an open loop? Why doesn't the fashion industry recycle its own waste? Why do we only have incinerations and landfill as an only option? So it wasn't available before. So we started the actual journey in terms of research and development in the technology, where it comes down to the actual technology right now, focusing on separating the blended fiber. So it could be polyester, it could be natural plant-based fiber. We separate them and then recycle this fiber into a raw material component to prepare for textile industry. So it's a closed loop chemical recycling technology that we've been doing.
Wow, mind blown. So, okay, before we dig deeper into this, how did you get into it? I mean, was it like a family business that you went into, or did you start it yourself?
So I have a family business back in the day that is more on clothing business. So I wasn't really, I wasn't on the development side. I was more like tagging along. My mom was doing all the sourcing, marketing, sales. So like I grew up with, I guess, the textile business, but I never were thinking that I will be back into this business. I would never thought that way, because I was thinking my mom, as a little kid, she just teach me, oh, this fabric is good. This fabric is, you can do it this way. This is a good quality. This is a bad quality. And, which quality is, much more comfortable to wear. But I never conceptually really understand if they're sustainable or not, because that wasn't a topic as I was growing up. I was trained to be more of corporate sides, which I was more handling sourcing and marketing for the fast fashions, well, not fast fashion, I mean for FMCG companies. And I've been doing a lot of development. And that time, what inspired me to shift from corporate back into back into the company that I started myself is because I see corporate is very slow in innovation, but I was also able to witness from my bare eyes that you can turn plastic bottle into a pen. So for example, I used to work really closely with a company called Pentel, that they actually turn and Pilot, another brand is called Pilot. They turn a plastic bottle into called bottle to pen products, which I was fascinated. I'm like, oh, okay, you can do that. That's, amazing. And then working with these corporate company called Staples, they literally turn printing cartridges into rulers or calculators. And then I thought, why can't textile do something like this? Why can't fashion industry do something like this? So that's in my blood. But what makes it really shifted is I see the needs and the trends. People like you and I, always have the issue that we have to spring clean out of the wardrobe, you have no more space to put new clothes. Then I thought, hey, I'm also the victim of the system. I can't, I can give my waste to, charities, and like, you don't see it, then you don't care about it. But when I figured out they don't actually really recycle it, they sell it to a third world country, and then it go to landfill and they go to incineration. And I'm like, but the purpose of me giving this away is really to help people, but it's not to, get these people end up paying for it. So that really completely destroyed my value. And I think it's got nothing to really do with being sustainable by me giving my clothes away. Then I started the journey to, what, I will start down from scratch, see what if I put my corporate skill sets in place and transform, turning waste back into the more raw material one step at a time. And what we can do at the time is mechanical recycling, which is turning plastic bottle into fabric. But what we're doing, the next step up, is the chemical recycling.
Wow. Yeah, no, so the reason I asked you was because I feel like you're doing such amazing things, but you're doing such amazing thing in such a short time. And I was just wondering, what's the barrier to entry if someone else wanted to start their own factory, fabric recycling, etc. Because I think when you're sewing, you just need some machines, for example, but it feels like what you're doing is a whole other skill set that they have to acquire, and the machines potentially are much bigger. And so anyway, that was my curiosity. But okay, so you're talking about recycling plastic bottles in the open loop, and you're right, everyone, the focus is about recycling something else into materials, but no one really talks about what happens to the materials once you use them, what happens to them. And I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that 30% of all garments end up in the landfill, whether they are from your home because you never worn them, or they're left over in factories. And that's huge percentage, right? And but then I was thinking that it's not just about them landing in the landfill, it's the fact that also some of them are not biodegradable, so they don't biodegrade, they don't turn into anything else. Talk to me a little bit about the difference between the mechanical and the chemical, what did you call it? Recycling? Yeah, and also what is the difference between something that is recycled material and also biodegradable and compostable? Because these are, again, new terminology that I'm beginning to hear quite a lot, and I don't think that most people make differentiation.
Right. So what we've been doing in the past 5 years, so let me just step back.
Yeah.
Mechanical recycling is started out plastic bottle into yarns. It was actually invented, I would say, probably 15 to 20 years ago by a Japanese. And this technology was not adopted, and it really takes a good, the past 5 to 10 years, it really start picking it up. And mechanical recycling, most of the time, only can really handle one fabric. So if it's recycled polyester, you can only handle recycled polyester. If it's cotton, just cotton. Why? Because essentially, they can't separate. Mechanicals, only what they can do is shred. It's just shred. But the problem, let's say if you can shred it, recycled polyester, fine. You can melt it back. You can actually make it into new yarns. But you will tend to see the quality, it deteriorates. Because as you see plastic bottle, if this plastic bottle is heated in the hot water, it starts shrinking. right? When it shrinks, it can't expand it back. You can't blow it back. And that's the thing. Once the actual plastic bottle is transformed and it goes into a mechanical recycling, it goes through a heating stage where the quality cannot be reversed. So that's why when you mechanically recycle, you downgrade the quality. Same as cotton as well. So when you actually do mechanical recycling, once you break the fiber, the viscosity of the cotton, you break it. You can't glue it back. The only way that you can put it back together is as if you were having recycled polyester or polyester bind it with the cotton. But this will be a binded material instead of a single fiber again. So at the end of the day, there are such a big limitation in mechanical recycling where you can never handle spandex. You can never handle other material. So either you are handling single fiber, or you just be like, jack of all trade, take care of all the fiber, but you only really blend them and make them become shorties. And these shorties only can go to building sites for insulations or toy stuffing, car stuffing, and they really going down to the end of life cycle. Once you really finish that car, the building, you cannot recycle again. And that is a major challenge in our society, is still in the linear approach. If we're still going through that way, these fiber cannot be recycled. It's in bad quality conditions. And when we're looking at in the next 10 and 20 years, these fiber really cannot be repurposed anymore. You cannot, because it's really bad quality. Whereas mechanical recycling is very different. Mechanical recycling is a new era, which is only starting to develop.
Chemical.
Sorry?
You mean chemical?
Yes, I mean chemical, sorry. Chemical recycling is newly developed. And what makes chemical recycling very different is that it can handle multiple fiber in comparison just to one fiber at a time. And chemical fiber also have the I guess the magic that you can maintain and the fiber quality as much as good as possible in comparison to the mechanical version. So therefore, for example, right now in the industry, we really there's only a handful of companies doing this. And we really are focusing the first challenge, which is the biggest challenge, to deal with blended fiber, poly and cotton, or poly cotton blended with, let's say, viscose or cellulosic fiber, because these are the majority of the fiber you see year on year is being produced over the whole world. So polyester, according to Textile Exchange, really produce approximately 50 to 58% over the whole fiber spectrum, whereas cotton is only 22%. Right? And then if you start looking at, okay, what about polyamides? What about, polyurethane? And that's just like tiny little bit. If you add the all what do you call it, like synthetic fiber, add up together, you won't get all the way up to 60%, but it's within that spectrum already. Looking at spandex is really, I think, around single digit. Really single digit. Wool I remember is 9%. Wool and silk is really low. So if you're looking at, okay, if I were to recycle, what are the fiber is already out there? What are the frequent mix? Either you're 100% or you blend it with something else, right? Obviously you have you have nylon. Obviously you have, for example, hemp, and those are hemp and cellulose, tencel, model. Those are sitting in the cellulosic fiber. And that's fine. But cellulosic is only 6% if you add them all up. So cotton and cellulosic add up is 28%, right? And this report is totally can be free. You can download in Textile Exchange. I didn't make it up. But if you were to recycle them, then you have to really start tackling the biggest problem in the society, which is the blended material. And this blended material cannot go through the normal mechanical recycling.
Right, because mechanical is shredding, right?
Yeah.
And so you deal with chemicals to separate the fibers.
Exactly. And according to Fashion for Good, so Fashion for Good is an organization in the Netherlands that really incubate a lot of innovations specifically for the textile industry. And more than 40% of the fabric that we wear today is made out of blended fiber. So just, do a quick test. check your jeans, check the top that you wear.
Everything's blended, yeah.
Everything is, it's mostly blended. And this is only what we wear today. Imagine 5 years down the track, we have to start looking at recycling, not what people purchase today, is what they throw after.
Yeah.
Right? So right now, we probably will be handling waste that people are probably, they bought them a year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years ago. And those are the ways that you can see the trend in terms of material productions. And you can see the vast majority is mostly blended, and they cannot be handled and have to be handled in incinerations. So that's where the challenge right now. Now, let's talk about biodegradable. So biodegradable, it's actually not something really new. To be honest, me being in the industry in the past 5 years, we always try to look into biodegradable product, in biodegradable polyester. And speaking of which, this year, my first company will be launching a biodegradable materials in our website, in our company as well. But why is it that biodegradable products so difficult to launch? I mean, I've been working with directly the actual yarn manufacturers to work on biodegradable for such a long time, and biodegradable have issue previously 5 years ago. The quality is an issue, because once you weave it and once you actually make it into product, the concern is really on the longevity side, right? In order for the fabric to be biodegradable, you have to treat the material in certain temperature, certain environment, in order for it to be that biodegrade. But also the challenge is, as soon as you start blending the biodegradable material with other fibers, which changes the conditions of the environment, it will not biodegrade as it would have planned. Wow. So that's something you have to put in mind. And also is that, are we still going to go into landfill in the future, next 5-10 years? I am as sustainable as it can be. But let's say if I incorporate biodegradable fabric right now in production, let's say people throw them away next 2-3 years. But if landfill is not even a possibility anymore, biodegradability, is that still going to be a trend? Because we're so against landfill at the moment, because it's really damaging our environments. So this is something that I think we need to put into consideration. When I work with some of biggest, I guess, one of the biggest Spandex company, they used to develop biodegradable Spandex product. So I'm not going to name the name of the company. Probably people can guess. And the reason why they developed is because all the big brands were asking them, can you actually give me a biodegradable Spandex? And they asked, they made. And at the end of the day, the biodegradable Spandex were probably a few cents more expensive per piece. But still, the brand is still not willing to pay for that premium. So sometimes, even though the market asks, you respond, but it doesn't correlate and justify the demand and supply for some reason. So I guess, but the good thing is probably the reason why that didn't work out is because it was, a couple of years ago, the market wasn't ready for it. But now the market is getting much more ready for being transformed into sustainable fashion. And that's where the opportunity really lays. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to, mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, and biodegradable, it's really I guess it's a balancing act at the moment. And I see a lot of innovation in biodegradable, but we really need to ask ourselves, are we going to have all the things at the end of the day biodegrade in landfill? Is it still going to work?
Yeah, is biodegradable and compostable the same thing or different?
Almost the same thing, but the key thing is, like, if you were to biodegrade, let's say I have a piece of fabric completely biodegrade, but your yarn isn't.
Okay.
Like, the sewing thread isn't biodegradable,
yes.
right? Think about it. And if you do digital printing on a biodegradable fabric, you change the condition again. The actual composting, the actual period of time for it to degrade as it plants, it will not be the same. So this is something that you have to really take into consideration at the end of the day, because not all biodegradable material really would work for the market at the end of the life cycle. Wow. And very likely you have a jacket, inner lining, outside shell, it's different material, then can you biodegrade the whole garment? No, you cannot. You have to still separate it. But do people really separate it before they donate it to Salvation Army? No, they don't do that. And when you go into Salvation Army, would they separate the material before they actually sell to third party? No, they won't do that. They
Yeah,
won't do that.
I guess partly they won't do it because people don't know what's biodegradable and what isn't. So what are the like the worst fibers and fabrics that one should stay away from using?
I would say at the moment, probably the most difficult to handle would be spandex, because it's sitting in the synthetic material, and spandex essentially is made out of polyurethane. But the percentage of spandex consumption in the whole world is so little. You know, if you check normal clothes that you wear, like what I'm wearing today, is knitted. It's not spandex, right? You might have a bit of spandex in jeans, a bit of spandex in swimming, like bikinis, and maybe like your leggings.
Stretch,
Yeah, with a bit of stretch. Sometimes t-shirt as well, but maximum 5%, right? 10%. And the one that you really get the most stretch is really your activewear materials.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, most of the time clothing that you and I wear today doesn't really require that kind of a stretch that you needed. So that's the reason why it's actually quite difficult. And if you're speaking to a company like Aquafil, which is the most like known company that recycle nylon from fish net, right? These company, they also, not them, but the end product that they actually produce are mostly weave with spandex or maybe elastane. And those are the difficult ones that, you know, to be recycled. If you say, oh, hey, Aquafil, take my swimming, fabric and recycle it again, they can't. I mean, you have to separate the fiber before they can further recycle it.
Yeah. So your company, where do you get your fabric that you separate chemically? You know, where does it come from? Is it like waste from other brands they send to you and you chemically separate it, and then what happens?
Yeah, I think essentially the feedstock, that's what we call like the textile waste. We call them the textile feedstock. It came from 3 different stages. It can be from pre-consumer waste, meaning, for example, like I said, you know, fabric already have defects before you go into cut trim make tables. And then it can be post-industrial waste, so the cut trim make, you know, leftovers. Or it could have been, for example, hotel or, you know, hospitality services industry, they have the leftover finished not using bedsheet linens, so on and so forth. Or it can be post-consumer waste, meaning it can be defect, return goods, or, you know, clothing that come into the end of life cycle people don't want to wear again. So we come from various different stages, but mostly come from these 3 stages.
Okay. And do companies have to pay for you to take this off their hands, or do they just like give it to you for free? And how does it work?
I think it really depends on, at the end of the day, what sort of objective the company wants. Because some company, they really don't care what we do with it. So they'll be like, just take it away, right? But there's also some company, they really focus on having these waste that they actually give away and bring them back into their production life cycle and the supply chain. And if they do care about, and that's what we call circular fashion. So circular fashion essentially is, how do you bring your waste back into the raw material again, and then you have your linear approach production, but we just band it, turn the waste back. So if we want to turn the waste back into the raw material, then we need to understand and study what specification and what material do they actually use and what do they want to turn it back. So, and the key thing is, most of these, we're getting more and more big brands wanted to actually have this circularity embedded in their actual supply chain. And that's where you see the, you know, the changes in the industry and the difference. Because at the end of the day, like company, as we go, having 2030 UN goals, there will be much more government frameworks and requirements for companies, specifically textile industries, to work on recycling their waste. If they don't, they will have to pay extra land tax. If they don't, they will have to actually, you know, pay for additional, I guess, like, you know, government payments. So then, you know, these industry are able to turn the waste back into raw material. So it's not, I wouldn't use the word penalize, but indirectly they are. in the sense, because this is for us to all achieve the 2030 UN sustainable goal. These are some of the steps that already I've seen in place.
Okay. And do you see I mean, I imagine that the big companies are much better geared up to, achieve these goals for sustainability, better positioned and better organized than smaller brands. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, because the bigger brand, they're much more willing to try to collaborate at this stage. And the reason why they need to collaborate is because they need to understand the cost and benefit for the supply chain. Because this is going to be a huge change. If they're not geared up and ready for these changes, they don't know how to pivot into a sustainable brand if you don't try. I mean, if I tell you, Daisy, I was like, oh, hey, Daisy, I have this, technology available. You're like, oh, great. But at the end of the day, you don't know how much do you have to pay extra to use this technology. How do you implement this? You don't understand, right? Then that's the reason why it's important to have the collaborations and important to actually start out and try out. Because between now till we can fully be commercially recycled, there's still a bit of a process, and they still need to be having they still need to have a proper and better integrations in place into the actual bigger brands supply chain. Because at the end of the day, we are not actually going through, hey, I buy the raw material and I produce. It's going to turn into that I buy the raw material and I produce, it becomes waste. And how do I bend the waste back into my raw material again? What is the cost structure is that going to be for the actual company to run? And that's the huge change. And I would say it's not difficult to make, but it's just have to do a step at a time. So, brands and also innovation understand the sweet spot to work together and come, because right now in consumer, they're ready for the changes. If they don't change, the brands is going to be out of the game. And Gen Z, there was a blog that we published recently, Gen Z and also the millennials, they're so forward thinking for sustainability. It's almost like if you don't change, you might be out of the game, really.
But you say this, but at the same time, I was talking to someone the other day who is of that generation, Gen Z, and she said that, yes, they care about sustainability, but aesthetics, design, brand, and price is more important to them. I mean, they would buy it because they really like something or the brand and the price is right, and then the sustainability tags on with that, but they're not going to not buy something simply because it didn't tick certain sustainability boxes.
Yeah, but what we see is that sustainability, it was such a niche market at the beginning. So when you are starting niche, of course, the cost is going to be higher, right? Yeah. So as we're going forward right now, many more brands are starting to adopt into sustainable fashion. You will start to see production costs come down, meaning the product price itself. Like I'll give you an example. If I were, I'm not quoting any particular fabric, but I am like with my company, I can already see if I'm able to produce a fabric for 5,000 to 10,000 meters, it can really easily, this fabric, can be around $2-3 per meter, given they're also made sustainable. So if you compare that with, for example, non-sustainable, which is could be similar price point, it's not that much different, but you can standing in a, I guess, cost-effective price point. But right now, the reason why we haven't been there yet is also because a lot of SMEs are in place, pushing sustainability. Some bigger brands are gearing toward it, but they still, need to understand what material they can use, and then they can replace the existing products, so on and so forth, and understand the costs and benefits within the company itself. And I don't have any doubt as we go, the bigger brands will probably come on and adopt into sustainability themselves, and then you see the price point, it will justify. So design, we can't do anything with design with textile industry. Design is up to the brands, but it's more of them thinking out loud. Okay, if I wanted to start being sustainable, use sustainable material first, but how do I completely be a design in circularity brand? Then you start adopting, how do I, use the material and manage the waste, and then actually loop it back into the raw material. So you have to do one step at a time.
Right. Wow. You work with both big and small brands, right? Who do you see is doing a better job of moving the whole sustainability action, not just talking about it, but like the actual action steps forward?
You mean compare the small brand and the big brand?
Yeah.
I would say It's a little bit difficult to compare at the moment because the big brands, they're still, they have the power to push the initiative, to influence their supply chain. But even though they have that power, they also are carefully maneuver themselves, understanding how to implement it as well. So it take them longer to implement it in comparison to the small brands, where most of the time SME brands, it's mostly a handful of people determine, maybe the brand owner, maybe the designers. So the decision-making process is much quicker for smaller brands. So I would say small brands still have that level of flexibility, whereas the bigger brands, they just have much more, I guess, negotiation power when it comes down to implementation, but still, I wouldn't say which one is better or worse, but it's just to the degree of size, how flexible that they can adopt to changes.
Yeah, you and I had some time back a conversation where I asked you whether big brands were guilty of greenwashing, the way everyone accuses them. And
Yes.
you said to me that they are more focused on innovation. We might not see what they're doing right now, and that's why we're accusing them of greenwashing, but actually behind the scenes, they're driving innovation forward.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. Is that a particular set of brands or is it most big groups? Because we have big brands, but they're part of a bigger group. So is it the groups really that are pushing the agenda, or is it individual brands within those groups?
Mixture. The best reference I would start up with is from Global Fashion Agenda. They, back in 2020, before 2020, they already started an initiative, I think maybe back in 2017 or 18, getting this big brand to start signing for zero waste commitments, or maybe they call it circular fashion initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So brands like Nike, Adidas, and the big fashion brand, they literally are all signed up for it to transition into these sustainable, I guess, fashion movement. Now, what does it mean? In this initiative that they have, there's certain guidelines. For example, have you start embedding sustainable material in your design? For example, have you taken care of how you handle waste? Have you start measuring, your production chains, see where you produce more CO2, so on and so forth? And also at the end of the day, have you considered using waste material loop it back into your raw material supply? So these are some of the steps that they start using to measure with the brand. Obviously, for big brand, like I said, it takes them some time to pivot into a new things. So right now, what we see is that some of these big brands are really pushing themselves to move. Like, for example, I spoke to Koichi. This is one of the brands that signed up for the fashion agenda, and also Lindex as well. And they like starting to work on the circularity design strategies, where they're looking into, okay, can I actually take my customers' textile waste, for example, they bought from my brand, and maybe there's a hole in the jeans. Can we repair it? Step one. And then if they can repair it, that's great. Then it doesn't go into landfill. Or if the quality is good, but they're not wearable anymore, what can they do exactly handling this waste? And then they start, and then the next step is to plan, what if they're not wearable and not functioning anymore? Where does this waste go? So you have to start planning one step at a time. And I do see a lot of action behind, because when you are working in handling these specific 3 sections, reuse, reuse, repurpose, and then you have recycle, you have to adopt different set of initiative and innovation behind. It's not like, oh, we just do it like that straight away. So innovation, for example, in sustainability, what are these big brands start looking at is that, can we actually not dye the material using toxic chemical waste? Can we use a new type of recycled material, for example, orange peel, mango fiber, cactus letters, something like that? Can we actually dye them and using not so much water? Or can we actually recycle the material just like what we do as one of the innovations, and then loop them back into the supply chain? So there's a lot of different, I guess, platform and landscape in terms of innovation wise, these brands are really involved because they are the one that actually driving initiative and doing collaborative project with these innovation, give them feedback, how these brands and how this innovation can really pivot themselves into a larger fashion landscape. And this is probably what a lot of small brand doesn't see in front of them, because I guess, you know, sometimes I hear a lot of small brand has certain hatreds speed towards specific brands. But again, at the end of the day, some of these brands that really have done a lot. I've seen them, they have created, for example, H&M. H&M is usually one of the key target in these kind of conversations. But I see H&M has started a H&M Foundation, and people was like, oh, this is just, you know, greenwashing, philanthropist things that they do. But H&M Foundation, in the past 5 years, they have funded innovation and research more than $5 million that they put out of their own pockets to innovate on how to recycle textile waste, because they have a lot of textile waste. And then they also funded Global Change Award. And Global Change Award is to award different innovation for traceability, transparency, and circularities in supply chain. And the winning will get funding from them. And then they also were part of, you know, Fashion for Good at the same time initiative to incubate and to cultivate innovation in textile supply chain. And these are the key things that I've seen been, you know, happening behind the scene, but it's probably not actively, you know, shared with a lot of the, I guess, fellow sustainable fashion brands. And you ask me, what are that, if their involvement does it really mean so much for innovation, and does it mean so much for us to push sustainability forward? It does, because when you think about all these innovation in place, if they don't have the feedback from big brands, how can they integrate at the end of the day if they are not being able to fund it? Because honestly, fashion industry or maybe innovations, it wasn't a key topic for most of the capital world funding. Like, you know, if you're talking about venture capitalists, they're much more happy to fund AI. They're much more happy to fund, you know, Internet of Things and like apps and all these other developments. And impact investment, it wasn't in their dialogue until really recently, the past 2-3 years. So where do innovations come and collaborate? Directly with brands, and that was the only method at the time. So that's the reason why a lot of small brands were not able to see this innovation, because these big brands, they do contribute quite a lot at the behind the scenes. C&A Foundation also were one of the big brands that I've seen have done so much in this landfill.
Yeah, interesting, because I think the big brands, they have the power and the resources to innovate, but for some reason they're slower to communicate out what they're doing. And when people in smaller brands are not seeing it, they're kind of going after them and criticizing. And then it just becomes this sort of chain reaction of negative talk, really. Whereas smaller brands are better at communicating, hey, this is what I'm doing, and drumming their own drum, but it's tiny little minuscule. I mean, I suppose cumulatively it can create a change, but on the grand scheme of things, it's not moving innovation. I
think it's also because when it comes down to the bigger brand, they have so many departments, right? And it's like one department really handle one thing. Like what I tend to see sometimes, for example, designers are so into sustainable fashion. They wanted to use recycled material to design. But when you talk to the purchasing manager, they have completely dialogue. Okay, I have to see if this piece of fabric is at the end of the day match with, you know, the return on investment that I wanted to see. Like it's a completely different dialogue, and that's the reason why the changes is relatively slow, because the conversation with the head of sustainability designer is often very different from the purchasing managers.
There's so many stakeholders in that you know, in that chain of command. Interesting. So what can, you know, going back to what you do and the whole recycling of fabrics, etc., what can smaller brands do to make a difference? So what are some do's and don'ts?
I think there's quite a lot of things like small brands can already do right now. What we tend to see in sustainable fashion is either heading toward slow fashion, reuse and upcycle, or recycle fashion and scalability. So I think one thing we have to put in place is that what sort of impact does a small brand wants to have? Because if you wanted to have a bigger impact, you have to make sure your process is scalable. Because one thing you need to understand with, let's say, slow fashions, I love slow fashion because I like to wear, timeless pieces and I don't have to change so much. But when it comes down to upcycling, or for example, let's say repurpose a garment, it only lasts to a certain life cycle. And after that life cycle, you really cannot do much with it, unfortunately. And for the process for you to scale up that upcycling is also relatively long. Let's say you have a garment, you have to repurpose to make it into a bag. And that takes a couple of hours, design and cut and trim make, and that is not scalable. So the impact to the world, it's relatively small in comparison. So I would say in order for brands to have a bigger impact is to adopt into much more scalable approach. And to be more scalable is to tap along with what also the big brand do, use recycled material, use materials which is already sustainable. And then, and look into what sort of innovation that they want to be a part of, already signed up, even early on, test and try out and give feedback. And this is already making a bigger effort. Looking at the waste that we produce 47 million tons of textile waste every single year, according to Ellen MacArthur Foundations. How are we going to repurpose this? How many years do we have to repurpose this amount of waste in order for us to get rid of it? We can't. It's impossible. So the only scalable approach is to, tap along with, technology and innovation. Then you can really get rid of it, like at a larger chunk at a size. Then you have a bigger impact. Then we can actually slow down the, the CO2 production. Because if we don't tap on that, in my view, you're still doing some small changes, but these small changes can be easily compensated with someone, take too many flight back and forth around the world, then it's being already compensated. Yeah. So it doesn't really adjust it's not really, I guess, justify the effort that you put into the sustainability in place.
So back to my question, what are like little practical things they can do? Like, for example, should they stick with man-made fibers, or natural fibers? Is one better than the other? Should they try to maybe look at working with fabrics that are less blended?
Yeah.
What are little practical things that we can give as an advice to brands that can help us move forward?
So from a material perspective, I would say use more recycled materials that can be recycled at the end of life cycle. When it comes down to, let's say you really need functional blended material, using less blend is better than more blend. So I've seen material that, you have 2 blend, 3 blend, 4 blends of fiber. Don't go all the way to 4 blend, because sometimes 4 blend, maybe it gives you a little bit of aesthetic functional support, but you might also be able to find material that can just replace that, because you don't, need the additional 4 blend. Once you are recycling 4 blends, it's much more difficult to compare to recycle 2 blend, for example, material, or 3 blend. And then another thing is that when it comes down to applying this practice into this sustainability in design, starting to think, can I actually, if I were to design a recycled polyester garment, can I use recycled polyester zippers? Can I use recycled polyester yarns? So at the end of the life cycle, the whole garment can actually just be recycled. You don't even need to separate it. The challenge right now we have is definitely the zippers is different material, the button is different materials, the thread might be different material as well. So when it comes down to recycling, it gets really complicated, because you have to really put them in parts and then separate it, and then, recycling, all these additional steps, it will go back into the society, because, every step in the place is cost. So make it quite maybe it take more time to develop, but if you take the initiative to research, to develop these slower fashion pieces, I also see the advantage, because at the end of life cycle, you can really claim design in circularity in place.
Wow, it's interesting. I don't think that most people, and I might be wrong, but I don't think that most people go down to the detail of thinking, is my thread, recyclable or biodegradable? the
Yeah.
zipper and all of that.
Yeah.
Can you just like not put a whole garment in the ground, let's say, and some parts will biodegrade and others just won't? Does it not work like that?
No, if you speak to most of the textile recyclers, the key challenges that they will say to you, let's say, for example, I collect in Germany, or maybe Switzerland is tax A, in UK also have some textile recycler collect. If they were to recycle the pieces, they will say, the challenge that I have is button and zippers, because they have to separate the button and zippers before it comes to technology like ourselves.
Yeah, because you can't either put it mechanically or chemically. Right. Okay. I get you. Wow, interesting.
But if you have the whole pieces that is all made out of, let's say, recycled polyester, then it can go through because it's all recycled polyester.
Interesting. Is there one particular nation you see that leads the whole sustainability conversation more than another?
Specific brand, you mean?
No, nation, country, area, geographical area.
I would say both UK and Germany have been quite forward thinking in sustainable fashion. But obviously, the neighbor country like Sweden's and, Italians are trying to pick it up as well, and Finland as well. But the reason why I pick UK and Germany is because they usually have also bigger buying powers in the European area. And initiative-wise, purchasing-wise, textile-wise, I see a lot of UK brands are really pushing sustainability in their product design, in comparison to France and Italy at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, in Germany, it's an interesting one because they have quite a lot of trade shows, like compared to the UK. And very often when I hear something about particular fabric shows or something, very often there's something going on in Germany.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
it's because
Germany is not exactly known for fashion.
No, it's not. But that's actually go back down to Frankfurt Messe. So I'm connected to people who organize Frankfurt Messe in Berlin. And they have been organized in the past 5 to 10 years, I think, green showroom, ethical fashion room, or ethical, And these actual trade fair, I remember statistically, they've told me the participant or the brands that joining this trade show double almost every year. And they showed me the statistic. I remember they said that, 5 years ago, we only take 1 floor. Now we have to take 4 buildings because it's just not enough space. 1 building to do this, 1 building to do this. And then I think the last one that I went to was 2019, back in 2 years ago, and it's in a the location hasn't changed, but I saw them really the first time I went there. It was only 1 floor, and then that year it took 3 buildings, and then
that reminds me of
3 levels.
Do you remember Premier Vision used to be much smaller, and it's now expanded so big?
Exactly. So yeah, it's essentially, and that's changing right now, and you will see that sustainable fashion is going to replace a lot of the conventional fashions.
What do you mean? But as in terms of trade fairs?
In terms of, I guess, trade fair, people probably would do more wholesale buy in sustainable material, like made brands.
Okay.
And what you can see, I'll give you an example, like Zalando in Germany. They last 2 years, I work with their team, and I know it quite well that they've been working so hard to really reselect their vendors. And a lot of them, at least I think a lot of them, if they're not sustainable, they're not there. And they have much more larger sustainable assortment in the platform in comparison to other platform, like, for example, the Iconics in Australia, or I think in UK you have Boohoo, for example. I don't think Boohoo is particularly sustainable oriented. Or if you're looking at ASOS, it actually would be a good example as well. But they are also supported with sustainability. But when it comes to assortment and specifically sorting sustainable material, it's not as easily found in comparison to Zalando platform.
Yeah. Wow, gosh, so much information. It's really exciting to have these explanations, but also to understand from you what big companies are doing that perhaps we're just not seeing, but doesn't mean that they're just sitting and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, as it seems like in the next few years, it's all going to come together. Now we're going to see the effort of all that. Excellent. So small brands, can they contact you?
Yes, yes. I work with a lot of small brands because my first company is mostly focused on SME brands. So if they want to contact me, they can actually go into edwina.huang@vivifytextiles.com.
Okay, I will put that in the show notes. But so they can come to your first company and they can buy raw materials, fabrics from there.
Yeah.
That are sustainable.
Yeah.
Recyclable.
Yeah.
And small quantities.
Yeah, and we're also working on launching a design and circularity range this year. So meaning that, fabric that is 100% made out of recycled polyester that has a stretch.
Wow.
So you don't even need to have spandex in it. You can actually, have the material come with the stretch, and we will be launching recycled polyester yarns, sewing threads, and also zippers. So that they can have the whole full pieces garment that come in this design and circularity.
Wow, that's super exciting. So they can come to you for sourcing fabrics, and can they also come to you for end of life, for giving wasted materials and things like that? How does that work?
They can definitely be in touch with us directly, because right now we are already starting to launch some services. We haven't expanded to SME yet. But I think SMEs is actually part of our plan to expand probably in the next 1 or 2 years. So we can definitely be in touch. And what we are working on is to hopefully create a direct collection services where we can collect the direct, textile waste, and then it can go directly to our technology to recycle. So then it come into, the raw material again. So, but this is something that is to be launched.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And if someone wanted to find out more information about what we were talking and about materials and how to pick better materials in order to be truly sustainable, but also have, that ripple effect of goodness, where can they go?
At the moment, I think what we also are launching is actually we're working on launching an online course. And this online course is more directly in regards to relate to B2B, how to select materials, sustainable materials, and also how to consider using this material to support your sustainable brand to make it circular in design. So I think what we will be working on is that there will be some TikTok, not TikTok, Clubhouse conferences that we are working on directly, and we can directly work with these customers to share feedbacks. So I would say sign up the newsletters, and then we can share more information in the upcoming.
Would it be somewhere else aside from Clubhouse? Because Clubhouse, once it's gone, it's gone. It doesn't stay on, right?
Yes, but what we do, Clubhouse is more on what do you call it, like a scheduled discussion. But what these scheduled discussions, it turned out is that it will be transformed into our online course information. Okay. So this online course that people can just tap onto it, and they can actually directly learn, and they can reloop it themselves at their free time.
Wow, super exciting, interesting stuff you're working on. Okay, great. Last question. So I know where people can find you. I'll list all the different contact links for you and social media handles. Last question. What is the best advice you've ever received that's kind of still stays with you and works?
In terms of the fashion industry, or in general?
Just in general. It can work for you personally or business or.
I think the most insightful advice I've ever had was that somebody ever told me, the world is your oyster, go and get it. So don't be afraid of not doing something, but just go full in and try to do it, and you will see your impact. So that was, I guess, much more impactful than I thought, because I never thought that somebody would see that power in me. And sometimes, you might be too scared or too shy to show who you are, but just do it regardless, because this world needs your impact and needs your energy, needs your power to transform into a better world. So I think that was the most impactful advice I've ever got.
Such a nice advice. And it's funny how sometimes we almost like need permission, right? To dream big.
Yeah, essentially, it also, I don't know if it's got to do with the female side, but you know, I was born to be a very polite person, but now that that person told me, that's like, no, you don't have to, you know, ask for permission, just do it. The world is your oyster, just go and get it. So yeah, I think that was, it brings me tears to think about it. It was, I'm still forever thankful for that person.
Yeah, well, you certainly are going after the world with what you're doing.
Let's see how they go.
Okay, so cool. Thank you so much. That was really, really fascinating and so information dense. I think I'll probably listen to it again and try to assimilate everything. But it would be nice to, you know, maybe in a few months pick it up again and see how things are developing. And
Definitely.
especially if you do your course, I'd love to know about it so that we can spread the word.
Yes. For sure. We will definitely do that. Thank you so much, Desi, for the interview.